My apologies. These pop-ups keep coming up or whatever every time we go into live streaming, and it shuts the computer down every so often. Anyway, welcome everyone to the October 19th council meeting. Prior to the open session, council met for a brief closed session. It was moved by Councillor Horn, seconded by Councillor Borneman, that pursuant to section 239(2) and 3 of the Municipal Act, SO 2001 C25 is amended. Council of the Corporation of Town of Parry Sound moved to meeting closed to the public in order to address matters pertaining to C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land for municipal or local board purposes, proposed property purchase, proposed property sale, potential change to municipal boundary. And K, a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, potential change to municipal boundary. And that was carried and that meeting was held. Remind everyone that the meeting is live streamed and recorded, and you can go to the town's website at www.parrysound.ca. and you can view the meetings past and present there as well. I would like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people under the Robinson-Huron Treaty and the Métis that travel the waterways of our area. Is there a mover and seconder for the agenda? Councillor McCann, Councillor Horn. Is there any prioritization of that agenda? No. Okay. The council agenda for October 19th, 2021 be approved as circulated. Anyone opposed to the passing of that resolution? No, that's carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Seeing none, mover and seconder for the minutes then. Councillor Backman and Councillor Burden, that the council agenda for October 19th, 2021 be approved as circulated. Any discussion on those minutes? No? Okay. Anyone opposed to the passing of the resolution about the minutes? No, that's carried then. Questions of staff? Councillor Keith.
Yes, thank you. I have a question for Mr. Cairns. I'm wondering if you can just update the public in respect to the Cascade Street railing. What's the plans there and how is the town working with design engineers, etc.? Thank you.
Yes, through your worship. So we have been looking at the redesign and the reinstallation of that that railing on the lower section of the Cascade Hill. We did review the plans from the Cascade Street reconstruction, which was approximately a decade ago or so. And there was an indication that the railing was intended to be replaced. Now we've, in consultation with staff, determined that the way in which the railing was placed previously was a little bit problematic from a winter maintenance perspective, from the machinery and that sort of thing, and could have created a hazard. So we engaged a firm who came to look at it. They got back to us and they were unable to help us at this time with the amount of work that they have scheduled. So we were in touch with another firm that did subsequently meet us on site really quickly. So we've looked at the design requirements related to our snow removal operations as well. Spoken to our operations staff about that, and we're in the process of designing a railing that will function as a railing without inhibiting snow removal. And our contractors indicated that with the cooperation of our operations department, we'll be able to get it in before this winter. So.
Okay, good. Councillor Backman, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question this evening is for Mr. Cairns. I just wanted to know if you could kindly provide an update on the work that was done on Parry Sound Drive and if it is completed and what exactly was done there.
Okay, could I just ask for a little more clarification? Do you specifically just the maintenance work that was happening?
I think she's
Uh-oh.
frozen.
Is Councillor Bachman frozen?
I
So
believe so.
I perhaps, Your Worship, I'll go in the assumption that that's what we're addressing. Yeah, correct. Okay, so the maintenance work that was done, staff were out grading the shoulders on Parry Sound Drive. It is obviously an historic or a legacy piece of Highway 69, so it's a little bit different construction than the rest of our roads in town. And the shoulders tend to take a fair bit of runoff, and part of the process is to bring the shoulders back into the edge of the asphalt. If we don't address that, we end up with what's known as edge break off on the asphalt. And once that starts, it's very difficult to control. So it's essentially a maintenance activity. And there were some other drainage improvements that happened as well this past season, I'll say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Barneman?
I can't see everyone on the screen, Your Worship. I'm not sure if Ms. McNamara is here or if this is for Mr. Cairns as well. This is kind of a COVID reopening question in the sense that currently the showers in the change rooms at the BOCC are unavailable for folks who are using the building. As I understand it, it's a bit of a patchwork quilt across the province. Some places they're closed, some places they're open. It's kind of a local call based on a number of factors, staffing and so on and so forth. I'm wondering if there's any plan or how we get back to full use of the facility. One individual pointed out to me, we haven't changed the pricing regime for ice time rentals, and as such, they should expect full service. So I'm just asking the question, how we get back or when we get back, how this plays out, Mr. Cairns or Miss McNamara, if she's there.
Yeah, certainly I can take that. Miss McNamara is not with us this evening, but certainly I can. And I'd just like to touch on your last point first, if I could, on the cost of ice. So it has been a topic of discussion. So I think it's important to remember all of these facilities and even all of the, whether they're recreational facilities or municipal facilities, while it may seem that there's a reduced level of service, there's actually a very significant increase in costs associated with cleaning supplies over the last 2 years. So there's an awful lot of things that have been added to all these facilities that have increased cost. And I think just generically from, anecdotally, my knowledge, most places have not increased the cost of rentals despite the challenges to deal with increased staffing for screening, that sort of thing, as well as cleaning. So we are hopeful that we may hear some new information this week from the province. Certainly we have followed right from the get-go public health advice. The big one for our facility and showers in particular is physical distancing. So that is still a requirement. So if you look at some of the capacity limits within those dressing rooms, we'll take 10 people as a round number, for instance. You have 15 minutes to get out to allow allow our staff adequate time to sanitize, process the next group through to ensure that we're able to keep back-to-back rentals. So I think logistically, it's not possible to put that many people through a very small shower room while maintaining physical distancing in that short a period of time. So until we see some changes, I think with the public health rules and advice, probably we're going to be in status quo for a little while, but there is some anticipation that we may hear some changes in the next little while.
Any further questions? Nope. Okay, correspondence, Ms. Johnson.
Your Worship, we just have one item of correspondence this evening. It's from Trudy Weeks, ratepayer in the town of Parry Sound. She addressed council with a number of concerns and summarized them in 4 points with questions. Her questions, the first point is about components that determined the fees and rules for chicken or backyard hen licensing, wondering what those fees, what determined the fees and the rules for that licensing. And what is that in relation to other animal licensing bylaws? For example, cats, wondering why they are not licensed. Wondering what is the town's plan for licensing of bicycles. The third question is access to town staff at the town office, particularly, during this time of the COVID pandemic. And the last question and concerns were about the rationale that the town has for decision-making on road maintenance and road prioritization. So these various items cross departmental lines, and a number of people were involved in drafting a response, and there is a response that is being made ready to be sent out within the coming day or so. There are maybe details that could be provided.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if council would like, I could highlight some of the points that will be included in the response to Mrs. Weeks' questions.
Sure.
With respect to licensing of backyard hens, the process started with consultation with a lot of other municipalities. This wasn't the town reinventing a wheel. It was based on what a number of other municipalities are doing. The licensing structure and the fact that there's a fee was to encourage residents who are thinking about backyard hens to be serious. There are requirements. We expect there will be complaints, and so we want to make sure that people that are embarking on having backyard hens, because there's a fee, take it more seriously and really think it through the process of what they're getting involved with. There are costs involved. So we expect the whole regulation, following up on complaints and annual inspections, the cost will be incurred by the town. And so the decision, as part of the recommendation that came to council, was, is it fair that those costs get borne through a licensing fee for the people that want backyard hens, or on the backs of the general ratepayer? And the decision was it should be a fee that applies to those individuals that want to have backyard hens. There was a public process, and as council's aware, there was a lot of comments and information received, both supportive and otherwise. In terms of the licensing of bicycles, currently, years ago, the town had a licensing program for bicycles. It hasn't been in place for many, many years. Cycling is a very popular outdoor activity, and we see it as part of a tourist attraction in the town of Parry Sound. And so we want to encourage cyclists. We want to encourage people to come to the town, and whether they're on the roads or the various trails that are available, or the fat bikes that are you see out in the wintertime, we want to encourage that. There would be probably more costs in licensing and enforcing bicycles than the revenue you might generate. So we didn't really see any particular advantage, and we still don't. So there's no plans at this point for the town, for staff to recommend having licensing of bicycles. In terms of the third question, rationale for the town office closure, I just want to drop back probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, when the pandemic started. And one of the things the province did was declare municipalities as an emergency service. So we provide services that aren't available elsewhere: potable water, water and sewer operations, winter control, and the list goes on. So the town and all municipalities in Ontario took this service delivery of essential services very seriously. And so the protection of the public and protection of the employees was a top priority for the town. We never closed the town office. I think it's more than semantics. There was no time when the staff weren't available to deal with whatever the service was that a resident wanted. We had restricted access, certainly, to the town offices and other facilities, but there were always staff here. Whatever the service was that was required, it was available, although it might have been available in a different form, i.e. video conferencing, electronic payment, using the Dropbox, emailing. Sometimes we met off-site, but the service was there. In cases where it was necessary to have an in-person meeting, commissioning of documents where you needed to see proof and ID, those appointments were arranged in the office. So access was restricted, but the service was, I would say, uninterrupted during the entire pandemic. And as council is aware now, the offices, the restricted access to the town office has been lifted. It's still a little bit controlled, but certainly members of the public can come into the building, and they'll notice there are some changes in the building as to where people can go. It's a little more restricted within the building. In terms of the fourth question, rationale for decision-making on road maintenance and prioritization, there's a number of inspection programs that the town has for its streets, culverts, bridges, etc. And that assessment, that condition assessment, we review that in connection with the provincial minimum maintenance standards. And with those two documents, it's much more complex than what I'm suggesting, but with minimum maintenance standard compared to our assessment of individual road and other infrastructure, they come up with a plan as to prioritizing things. That prioritizing may change because there might be other planned work on a particular roadway, so we defer the road work until perhaps the water or sewer work underneath needs to be done. So there's a coordination so that we don't dig up the road or damage infrastructure unnecessarily. So safety is also a big concern. And as I mentioned, timing of other capital repairs that might be unrelated directly to the road. So the plan is we've gotten comments from around the municipality on who's ever responsible for these areas. And this response should go to Mrs. Weeks tomorrow.
Okay, very good. Councillor Keith.
Yes, thank you. I'm just thinking, Mr. Mayor, that after this response goes out, I think it would be nice if all of us on council had a copy of this letter that goes out, because certainly that when the letter comes in, we all receive a copy. So I think this would be helpful for clarity and accountability and transparency for us to also receive a copy. Do you think that's possible?
Oh,
It better
absolutely
be possible.
No, and Councillor Keith is quite right. It's important that council understand the response and have it in there.
Okay. All right. We're on to reports. There are no deputations tonight. So the first one on the top corner there is Councillor McCann. So you're up.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, fellow councillors, staff, and public. Just a couple of things to report on this evening. The Parry Sound Public Library board meeting was held Wednesday morning, October 13th. I was not in attendance, but I am happy to report on it. I guess it was at about a 2-hour meeting focused on the sustainability of the building. That was the big conversation piece. The building is old. It's in need of the kind of repair and LTC that old buildings are known for. Money, of course, is always the problem. We don't have a reserve, something our auditor strongly advised that we fix right away, make a priority. There was a reserve at one time in place, which was held by the town when it was understood and believed that the town owned the building, but we've since learned from the records that the board owns the building and the land. Is actually an interesting piece of history to delve into. So we continue to explore means of raising capital. The building is 65 years old, and the investments in the infrastructure and maintenance and improvements are imminent. Significant expenses coming up will include insurance and equity pay. Equity pay, everybody knows, gets rather costly, and this goes back to 1994 in our case. So it's going to mean coming up with some funding to cover those necessary expenses. There's also the need to determine the present day market rates and values for salaries of our staff. Good news, though, as written by the North Star's Stephanie Johnson and is still current on their website regarding the work and progress the library staff has accomplished during the pandemic. As was presented at council during a deputation recently, Tom Lundy and Rita Orr, they talked about the kids' portal escape into knowledge as being a major addition to the library, including 4 computers and games directed at children. 5 months of fundraising this year have led to an amount of $16,000 toward the $30,000 goal. So staff working very hard, and the library continues to turn a lot of heads in our industry as people see what we're doing and accomplishing. Some sad news to pass along this evening. I'd like to take this opportunity to pass along condolences to the family of Robert, more affectionately known as Bob Cook, who passed away on Monday, October 4th. He was 76. Now, he resided at the Pines Long-Term Care in Bracebridge. Now, if you moved to Parry Sound in the last 20 years, this name probably won't mean much to you. But prior to that, Bob Cook served as the community safety officer with the Parry Sound, Ontario Provincial Police. And in this capacity, staff at CKLP FM in the 80s and 90s, and that would include yours truly, got to know Bob very well. The station had offered free time for public safety announcements, and Bob was in regularly to record those. And Bob was also instrumental and very passionate about the development and the annual presentation of the CKLP OPP Optimus Halloween Safety Show. And you may recall that that was all about getting kids back home at a reasonable time and a chance to win prizes that were donated by the business community. And the Optimus Club put a lot of effort and money into that as well. A man of integrity. He was a wonderful person, very serious about his work, and always a pleasure to see. And our sympathies to his sons, Dave and Rob, and their families going out this evening. I also learned this evening that Terry Brynn passed away. Terry, another well-known individual in this town, was heavily involved with the Sportsman Hockey League going back a few years. And we say and extend our sympathies and condolences to the Brynn family as well. So that's my report.
Thank you. Councillor Burden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everyone. Just a couple of things to report. On October the 6th, via Zoom, I took part in the annual general meeting of the Downtown Business Association. Main thing of interest there is to announce the upcoming Girlfriends Week, which is one of the few functions they've been able to carry on this year. I encourage people to go to the Parry Sound DBA website and get all the details, but basically there's going to be shuttle service and shopping and dining and workshops, and everything is free, or the registration is free. The workshops and everything, I believe, are free. So look into that. And also the Halloween, I think the DBA in cooperation with the Parry Sound Library are going to hold a Halloween event again this year. The kids can go to the library to register for that. On October 14th, I took part in the District Social Services regular meeting via Zoom, a meeting that lasted just under 4.5 hours. We had the 5-year plan that we had commissioned a company by the name HSC to prepare for us, was presented to us. Very well prepared, well laid out plan to help guide management staff and the board stay on target for the next 5 years and beyond. The board did accept that report and passed it, and it's now official. We also had the notice of a retirement of one of our board members, a lovely lady with the name of Barb Marlowe. She was also the vice chairman of the board and a counselor in Ryerson Township. Apparently, I think they said she was a counselor for about 40 years and on the social services board for 30 years. And she's retired, and I don't blame her. Barb turned 92 a while back, and she's sharp. So gives us all something to look forward to, hopefully. And that's my report.
Thank you. Councillor Horn.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Last night I attended the Chamber of Commerce board meeting. I would direct everyone to the Chamber website for the Shop Local campaign in conjunction with the DBA. As Councillor McCann said, I would like to acknowledge the passing last Thursday of Terry Brynn. Terry Brynn was a founding member of Community Living Parry Sound 60 years ago. And without his support and without his direction that his son be included in the activities within the town of Parry Sound, including education, volunteerism, we would not have the organization that we have today. So sympathies from Community Living Parry Sound to the Brynn family. I'd also like to acknowledge the passing of Mr. Tom Keats, who was a longtime teacher at Parry Sound High School. Mr. Keats passed away yesterday, and I'd like to send my condolences to the Keats family. Certainly, he was influential in many students' lives in the town of Parry Sound. So again, sympathy to the Keats family. Thank you. That's my report.
Thank you. Councillor Keith.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, fellow councillors, the staff and the public. I too would want to extend my condolences to Mickey, Terry Brynn's son. Terry certainly was an advocate for the community, wanting to always for the town to continue to provide the best service possible. I found him a very interesting fellow in conversations. He certainly could be quite outspoken with great ideas at times and a kind nature. So he certainly will be missed. I too remember quite well Bob Cook, and definitely again another very community-minded individual. So our community certainly is having a loss of some of these people who really have added to our community and the flavor of our community of being caring. Also, and moving on, but in a total different way, I would say also goodbye to our planner, our town planner, Taylor Elgie. I've enjoyed working with him, and I wish him well in the future. And I can only hope that things will be interesting for him, just as they will be for us. So thank you. That's my report.
Thank you. Councillor Backman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, everyone. I had one meeting to report on this evening, and that was for the Parry Sound Library Board that I attended on Wednesday, October 13th, but Councillor McCann pretty much summed it up. The only comment I would note on is that, yes, there are a little bit more in our budget this year that we will be required to consider, and that is due to the equity and the reserves related to the capital costs. One of the things we do need to focus on or try to better understand is our ability as a board to apply for grants, and that is something that will have future grants outside of the town of Parry Sound in respect to having the town to apply for those grants on behalf of us. And just to put it in perspective, we recently could have applied for a capital cost grant that would just supported our HVAC, but we did as a town apply for that for another entity. So we have to figure out how moving forward that we as a board can apply for those grants on our own so that we can become, of course, sustainable. And that's just something that we'll have further discussions with staff in the upcoming months. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Borneman.
Well, fortunately for the rest of you, I've been away and really have nothing to report. I do want to join with others in extending condolences to the Cook family and to Terry Brynn's family. He was a force to be reckoned with when he put his mind to something. The only other thing I'd report on is I received an email recently from Marianne King Wilson, who's a well-known name to many around the table. I'm not just sure how, but Marianne recently came in contact with Stephanie Joyner, who had been the EA or the executive director with the DBA some time ago. I believe she's still a board member. Roger can correct me if I'm wrong, but she has a strong presence in social media locally, promoting a whole slew of small businesses and different activities that are taking place in the community. And Miss King Wilson was impressed to the point where she suggests that council do something to commend this young lady for her activities in promoting downtown in particular. And I quite think that she's right. So that's my report, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Council staff and public, October 7th, I attended an MOU pre-meeting with and then in the afternoon was the MOU meeting with the province. October 8th, along with our CAO, Clayton Harris, and our MPP, Nora Miller, I attended a tour and understanding of the operations of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry base on our waterfront. And then October 14th, I attended the AMO Indigenous Task Force meeting. And then in the evening was the Parry Sound District Social Services Board meeting, which Councillor Burden covered off very well on that. So that's my report. Other than, yeah, I would also like to send my condolences to the Brynn family. Terry was a good man, and I know he's going to be missed in the community. And my thoughts go out to Mike and what he's working with right now. So that's my report. We go to item 7.1, which is an item from closed, and moved by Councillor Borneman, second by Councillor McCann, that bylaw number 2021-7183, being a bylaw to authorize the purchase of land known as 35 Wood Street, be considered as read a first time. All in favor? And that's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third reading? Carried. Moved by Councillor Borneman, second by Councillor McCann, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. And Mr. Kearns, do you want to explain a bit as to what this is about, please, so the public's aware?
Yeah, certainly, Your Worship. So we have successfully applied for and received permission and allocation of a rail safety improvement grant for the Isabella Street crossing, known locally as St. Charles Crossing, the double tracks heading down Isabella Street towards Wood Street. So subsequent to that successful application, we began to look at how we can maximize the improvements to safety for all road users, whether it's vehicular traffic or pedestrians or bicyclists in that area. And one of the considerations in improving that, the geometry of that intersection, was the limitations in the amount of land available to realign a road. And the discussion turned to what possible solutions might be available to us. So when we looked at it, the configuration pointed to the particular property at 35 Wood Street. So in our initial look at redesigning that intersection, it became quite obvious that acquiring at least a portion of that property, and more preferentially the entire property, would afford us many options in improving the geometry of that intersection, as well as improving the approaches to the rail from that direction as well. So part of our rail safety improvement program application was in terms of improving the approach lines and visibility and that sort of thing, as well as improving pedestrian crossing and overall safety through that double crossing. So the purchase of the property gives us some significant options in realigning that intersection for safety reasons. It also provides us with a potential construction staging area for the entire project, including the work to be done at the rail safety improvement project as well, portion of that project. The acquisition of the property also allows us to consider a lower cost capital design because of the elevation and the topography in the area is quite steep. It would be very challenging to maintain a very narrow roadway and would force us to put in vertical walls and that sort of thing. So it also allows us to address some drainage and easement items in that area. And at the end of it, there is a potential for, and it'll depend on the final design of the intersection realignment, but there is a potential for some green space to be available on that property at the end of the project cycle. And I guess I think the biggest thing overall is the improved user safety for all the users. So I know I'm repeating that one, but I think that was kind of forefront when we were looking at the redesign and in conjunction with the rail safety improvement program money as well.
Absolutely. It's I think it's paramount that this is good. It's a major step forward. And the other aspect of this is we will be going to CN and CP knocking on their doors because they own a significant piece of property. Number one, we need permission to access their property or whatever for the upgrades and repairs. And they should be contributing to this because they are promoting railway safety all the time and supposed to be, and this is paramount to railway safety in that particular area. So we will be pursuing funding from them as well to add to the money that we've received from Transport Canada. So we're a major step forward. Councillor McCann.
Well, I was going to, along the same lines, Mr. Mayor, say the same thing. We've been waiting for this for a long time. With the advent of the super school and with the development down by Thunder Creek, so on and so forth, we can only expect more pedestrian traffic, and that's going to make for a very safe place for the kids and adults to come and go. Yep. Do we have any idea in terms of timeline? I know there's a lot of moving parts to consider at this point. First one, of course, is completing the acquisition, but is there any timeline at all that we can expect this project to be completed? 3 years, 5 years?
Mr. Kearns?
Through your worship, we're going to be much more ambitious in attempting to complete this project with the rail safety improvement program being that could have been one of the slowdowns in terms of a project involving proximity to the tracks. So I think the cooperation of Transport Canada is maybe going to afford us an opportunity to accelerate this. So we're going to be on the final design engineering as soon as possible with the thought of moving into a very busy upcoming construction season in 2022.
And I would just add to all the comments that were made as well, that the money that was spent on acquiring this property, I felt was reasonable considering what the properties are going for these days. And I think the taxpayer needs to realize that the benefit far outweighs the money that was spent in terms of safety, beautification, and just overall a whole better corner down that way. So congratulations to all.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? Nope. Anyone opposed to passing this bylaw? Nope. Okay, that's good. It's carried. Moved by Councillor Keith and second by Councillor Burden that council accept the quotation from Bourgeois Ford North for a 2022 F-150 XLT in the amount of $50,072.44, including taxes, delivery, and the trade-in of a 2013 F-150. This being the only single source option after no tender bids were received before the deadline. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Councillor Borneman?
Just that I'm happy to see a local bid on these things. Those have been absent in recent years. I'm glad to see this taking place.
Yep, that's good. Anything further? Anyone opposed to passing this resolution? Nope, that's carried then. Moved by Councillor Borneman, second by Councillor Burden, that council award the tender for snow plowing all 10 municipal parking lots and facilities to Adams Brothers Construction in a combined total of $974.63, including HST per plowing event, and a combined total of $305.10, including HST for additional walkway clearing when required, this tender being the lowest overall of two tenders received. Any discussion? Councillor McCann?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would ask Mr. Kearns, what is the extent of a snow plowing event? What if it doesn't stop snowing for 5 days? Is that one event? Which can happen.
Through your worship, I guess it becomes what's reasonable. Normally, these lots would be accessed for the most part during business hours or during what we'll call extended daylight hours through the winter time. So in extraordinary circumstances, certainly we would be in contact with the contractors, and quite frankly, our staff would be in the same boat if we were to experience an extended essentially it would be after revisiting. So they would be expected. It would be the same as we would typically treat a roadway. When we've plowed it, while it may still very well be snowing, but we have treated it up until that point. And until there's a new accumulation of a certain amount of snow, we wouldn't treat it as a new visit, for instance.
Okay, thank you. I was being a little facetious there, but we know what some of our winters can deliver.
Councillor Keith?
Yes, thank you. I have two questions, and it is in respect to this tender. The background information indicates that if this is awarded tonight for the 1 year, that there is an option for a 1 year extension. I'm not clear on how that works, and explain how that would work, please.
Certainly, through your worship. So the intention of the 1 year extension would be at our discretion, with the ability to award the contractor the second year in accordance with the tender bid. The reason for that is we want to be able to accurately assess our progress through winter, and how we may be able to complement those activities internally, potentially, with changes in the way in which we conduct our operations. So this affords us an opportunity to accurately assess that with the option, should it be necessary, to have that second year in place.
Just for clarification, what I'm not still clear on is if one is considering the second year, I'd like to know would the cost be the same as the first year, or how does that work? Because I'm not still clear. Thanks.
So I guess technically the way in which it's written, it would be at the same cost. Now that perhaps is something that should have been contemplated, although it was not contemplated by the bidders in terms of requiring some sort of an increase. Now, having said that, I guess market conditions could vary significantly. So if it were problematic or deemed to be unfair to either side, I think we would be back at perhaps going through a new process. So there is that option as well.
Okay.
So then what I heard is if there was a cost and there was a quite a bit of a variable with the cost, that matter would be coming back to council. Is that what I'm hearing there?
Well, the way in which the tender is written, there is an option for a second year. Now that is an optional year, so it doesn't have to be accepted by the contractor either. So if there were to be an increase that was unacceptable, again, we could look at doing this through a new tender process for that second year and beyond, perhaps, or perhaps it'll be modified based on our findings over the next year as well.
Okay. Anything further? No? Okay. Anyone opposed to passing this resolution? No, that's carried then. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Horn and second by Councillor Keith that council approved the 2021 third quarter progress report on the town's key performance objectives, KPOs, as set out in Schedule A. I think probably Mr. Harris is chomping at the bit there to give us a rundown on this.
Thank you, Brady. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I do have a few comments I'd like to make. There's a lot of information there, and really the overriding objective is for for staff to let staff know what's going on in these strategic objectives, members of council, and ultimately the public, so that they can see where progress is being made. I think there's a couple of highlights I'd really pleased to highlight this evening, and I want to thank staff for all of their efforts. This is cross-departmental. These achievements, this progress we're making is across departments. Nothing is achieved on its own by any one individual. Of note, there's three things that I wanted to particularly note for members of council and the public, and that's 7 Bay Street. And I think it's well known that the town has wanted the M&R, the OPP, and the others that use 7 Bay Street to relocate, but keep those jobs and keep that service locally. Over the years, there's been various conversations, and most recently, Mayor McGarvey and myself had a delegation with 2 ministers, Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, and the Minister of Government Services. That was in August. Following that, there was some very positive support that we received for the concept of relocating the M&R properties. That would allow that property to either perhaps come into the town's hands or developers' hands for the redevelopment, which really would reshape the town's waterfront. Subsequent to that meeting, the province put an ad out asking for proposals on alternative locations that would suit primarily the M&R, but the other services that are out of that facility. So there's been progress, and I think the ministry is trying to, and the province is trying to support the town's request, and that is moving forward, not perhaps as fast as we'd like, but it is moving forward, and we're working with the province to find other locations that are suitable for them. The other good piece of news that is something that's been worked on for the last few years is the town of Parry Sound had requested several times to be out of the Parry Sound Area Planning Board. Recently, we're waiting for the I to be dotted and the T crossed, but we understand that the province has agreed to the town's request to be removed from the Parry Sound Area Planning Board effective January 1, 2022. That's important for anybody looking to develop or do business that requires planning approvals in town, as council has the ultimate say in planning approvals that would normally go to the planning board. The town is no longer just a commenting agency. The town council is now an approval body. So that's very good news. And there's a report later on in the agenda that we have to adjust our planning fees because we do have some additional work to do as part of that additional responsibility. However, we think in total, the fees will be certainly no more, and we believe less than they currently are in a combined. Plus, planning approvals can now happen quicker because the town is a commenting or the approval agency, not just a commenting agency. So that's very good news, and it's been a long time that we've been trying to achieve that. The other final thing that I wanted to highlight is we're trying to get a recreation and culture center in serving West Parry Sound for years. In June, the province and the federal government announced the $23.8 million grant, which is phenomenal, 73% of the capital funding. Since then, we've been able to reach a funding agreement and a partnership agreement with the area municipalities to fund the municipal portion of that $32 million project. So that agreement was reached September 9th. And part of the management of the Recreation and Culture Center, both the design, the construction, and the ongoing operation, is going to be managed by a board which has representation from the area municipalities and 2 First Nations. That board had their inaugural meeting on the morning of September 10th. So that's a major milestone that we've got that agreement with the area municipalities. It's huge, and when we get this recreation center constructed, it's going to make a huge difference in the lifestyles and the people that sit up and take notice of West Parry Sound and want to make West Parry Sound their home. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bachman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Harris, for the update on the plan.
Frozen.
To take this on, and it really was my hope that
Councillor Bachman, you were frozen with no idea what you said.
Sorry about that. So again, just reiterating my question regarding the Recreation Culture Master Plan. We approved the budget in 2018 and to date have been unsuccessful in getting a successful applicant to approval process on an RFP that has gone out twice. And I really had hoped that and thought it would be valuable that this information and plan would be completed before we were really moving forward with the Recreation and Cultural Center, and because the two tie in closely with the needs and the services that our community will be requiring, and as we look at how to provide better offerings, I'm just hoping that we can make this a priority over the winter months and hopefully achieve that before the end of this council term. And I'm just wondering if there's been any progress made on the consultants that we're working with, to find consultants to complete this plan.
Perhaps, Mr. Mayor, I'll make a comment and then ask Mr. Kearns if he has some additional comments. The Recreation Master Plan is a priority for council. It's a priority for staff. As you've mentioned, we've gone out twice for asking for requests for proposals and not getting a response. We've called particular firms, or staff have called firms and trying to get them to respond. We'll have to do some further research to try to understand why are they that busy. You know, what is the do they think it's not we're not offering enough in terms of the budget for it? We'll have to do some further investigation, but it's a priority for staff. It's just been frustrating that we aren't even getting responses. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Kearns. I think he may have some comments.
Yes, thank you. So in working with some other consultants on another project, the topic did come up. So they had indicated to us, and I will, we have not heard back. They were looking into those interactions they've had with some of the consultants that provide these services. They gave us some information that perhaps some of those projects that were occupying their time were coming to an end, and there may be an opportunity to take advantage of their availability. So I will certainly follow up on that very shortly. I will send off an email making that inquiry as to where those companies in particular stand. But our understanding was that they were quite busy. Obviously, the conditions during the pandemic have changed the way in which a lot of people have been able to conduct their business. That being said, I think everybody's a little more well-versed at this point. So there may be some availability at this point, but I will follow up on that quickly.
Yeah, follow up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to note, in reviewing the RFP that was submitted and reviewing other RFPs that other communities have put forth, I've noticed a difference in the length of the RFPs. I believe ours was, several pages, where I've seen other RFPs that are up to 25, 30 pages. So I'm not certain if that has anything to do with being unsuccessful with the RFP, but you may want to look at what other municipalities are putting out and review that with our RFP, because companies may be used to a much larger RFP package and may question that. So that's just a thought. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further with regard to the KPOs? No. And Councillor Keith?
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to have a little clarification in respect to the, it's near the very end where we got 2021 infrastructure and developmental statistics. And I noticed that it says new residential unit permits. And I'm just wanting to be clear, because I know that that's definitely not condos. Can one just elaborate on what are these new residential unit permits? Like, what do they tend on the average to be for?
Perhaps Mr. LG can respond to that.
Sorry, was that the number of residential units?
Yes, it said new residential unit permits. So what do they tend to be for on the average?
Makeup of,
Was the number around 70 or so, or the total number? Is that the column we're looking at? I just want to make sure. Yeah, so that included, for instance, in this recent quarter, 43 units with the Lighthouse project. So that's the condo down by the Granite Harbor, as well as a handful of single detached dwellings or units in the phase 2 of the Hall subdivision. But the condo was the big one. That's really what added up to the bigger number.
Okay. All right. Good. Anything further? Anyone opposed to the passing of this resolution? Nope. That's carried then. Moved by Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor McCann, that council hereby directs staff to review the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action and report back to council by February 1st, 2022, with recommendations on actionable items in response to the calls of actions and in the spirit of advancing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Any discussion? Councillor McCann?
Just wondering maybe if someone could speak more elaborately to this.
Ms. Johnson?
Spokesperson. Yeah, that would be fine. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, certainly, Your Worship. There was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission constituted in from 2007 to 2013, doing work as part of the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement between the federal government, churches, and the plaintiffs. So this commission issued a report after hearing over 6 years, testimony from over 6,500 witnesses and going to communities across the country. And after hearing all that material, hearing the testimony from witnesses, the commission issued a multi-unit, a multi-volume report. And at the end of that were 94 calls to action. A majority of these calls to action are to the federal government and to other organizational bodies. They do cover a range of issues like education, sports, heritage, justice issues. There are very few that are very specific and identify the municipality as in a call to action to municipalities. However, it does pose a framework for municipalities to review to determine what might be an appropriate municipal response to the calls to action. So we see this as a framework for staff to start with the review and to do consultation and to report back on what are implementable items from the calls to action. I would also point out that AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, has provided some guidelines as well for municipalities to consider in looking at the calls to action.
Wonderful. I look forward to that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I think it's an important step in everything that's going on right now, and in moving forward. So that's why I asked to have this brought forward. Any further comments, questions? Oh, anyone opposed to the passing of this resolution? No, that's carried then. Moved by Councillor Keith, second by Councillor Horn, that bylaw number 2021-7178 being a bylaw to amend the fees and services charges bylaw, sticky, 2010-5408 to include fees for consent, subdivision / condominiums and land division applications under the Planning Act be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. Members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Horn, second by Councillor Keith, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Any comments, questions? Mr. Algie, is there anything you want to add to this at all?
No, nothing I'd like to add. If there's any questions or comments, I'm here.
Okay. Councillor McCann.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, for Mr. LG then, so I know we talked about earlier this evening that it was mentioned about being removed from the Planning Act or the Planning Board. Just confirming that our fees are expected to remain fairly the same for any particular component along the way. What will be the big difference other than, if any, other than just the time saving factor for people looking to develop?
Through your worship, this will be new fees. We never charged for a lot of these matters before because the planning board would charge for this. One fee that will be dropped is we used to charge a municipal service review fee, so it's $300 and some. So it should be less in the grand scheme of things. What we've done for now is we've copied and pasted and adopted the planning board's fees just for the quick transition timelines. And at some point in the future, we can do a bit more of a thorough review to see how we match up with the greater area. But largely, when the council, when formally they passed a resolution with recommendations, and that went off to the planning board, now that will form the basis of an approval or denial or any type of decision. So it's a bit more streamlined in that approach.
So this is really different from, and I think I know the answer to this, development fees then.
It's not development charges.
Yeah, this isn't a development charge. That's correct.
Oh, development, exactly right. Sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Harris, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just might add that I think removing the planning board from the process will make it less confusing for members of the public. They would come out and delegate, if it was a town matter, they would come out and delegate at town council, perhaps not always realizing that council was commenting on the application, not approving it, that to preserve their rights to complain beyond the planning board, they would have to go to a planning board meeting. So it streamlines the process, and I think it's a little clearer for residents to understand now when they come to council and give their comments on an application, they're commenting at the approval stage, if you like. And so I think it'll be clearer for the residents as well.
Councillor Keith.
So then I would think that once this bylaw passes and once it's approved, all the I's and T's are all crossed, that Parry Sound is now totally looking after their planning matters, that these fee bylaw will be put on a website so anybody can take a peek and have a good idea ahead of time. And that may also make it a little more efficient in the town because it'll be one less question maybe sometimes it's being asked, so people can again be more efficient in moving on with what they need to do.
You're muted, Mr. Algie. There.
That is correct. The fees bylaw is posted on our website with all the town's fees, but in this case, planning and building fees. So it'll be in that section. So people who are a bit more industrious can just go find the answer to their question themselves, or we can direct them there if need be.
Okay. Councilor McCann.
So I'm just looking for a little education on how this works then, and perhaps Councillor Keith or Horn can help me with this one. So that as planning board members, did potential developers come to you with their ideas? And if that was the case, are they coming to council as a whole now, or will there be a special committee to hear these requests or deputations? What will happen there?
Mr. Algie.
Sorry, I thought I'd just jump in here. Typically, the pre-consultations come to the town. So a while ago when council passed the pre-consultation bylaw, I put in there severances and subdivision applications in anticipation of this happening. So that's good that we did that. It's one less administrative task we have to do at this stage. But on page 3 of the report, it kind of shows the general process for severances. So it would start just like a rezoning with an application. It gets circulated to the public. There's a recommended and optional public meeting. And then at that point, a staff report would come forward for council to make a decision upon. And following that, there are appeal rights. Once a decision's made, an applicant has 12 months to fulfill any conditions. And that's all behind the scenes. Council wouldn't see much of that. It's quite administrative between staff and the registry office and the applicant and surveyors and such.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Anything further? Nope. Okay, anyone opposed to passing this bylaw? No, that's carried then. Moved by Councillor McCann, second by Councillor Burden, that bylaw number 2021-7179, being a bylaw to deem certain lots in the town of Parry Sound not to be part of a registered plan of subdivision. Themer 60A Seguin Street be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. We're all members in favor of having the second and third readings. That's carried. Moved by Councillor McCann, second by Councillor Keith, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Any discussion or comments? No? Okay. Anyone opposed to the passing of this bylaw? Okay, that's carried then. Moved by Councillor Burden, second by Councillor Borneman, that bylaw number 2021-7180, being a bylaw to deem certain lots in the town of Parry Sound not to be part of a registered plan of subdivision. The trustees of St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, Parry Sound, Ontario, 58 Seguin Street, be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings, and that is carried. Moved by Councillor Burden and second by Councillor Borneman, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Any discussion, comments? No? Okay, anyone opposed to the passing of this bylaw? No, that's carried then. Moved by Councillor Horn, seconded by Councillor McCann, that bylaw number 2021-7181, being a bylaw to adopt the Bobby Orr Hall of Fame induction policy, be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. Are all members in favor of having the second and third readings? Good. It's carried. Moved by Councillor Keith, second by Councillor Horn, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. And we have Ms. Dyer has been sitting patiently since the beginning of the meeting. Do you have any comments or highlights that you would like to note with regard to this bylaw? Welcome.
Thank you, through your worship. I would just note that this is a little bit of housekeeping and a little bit of accomplishing new policy goals. So section 3 of the attached policy has been sort of followed by the Bobby Orr Hall of Fame induction committee since the very first induction. So those are the criteria for what constitutes being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and there have been no changes there, but we're just sort of formalizing the selection in terms of reference of the committee members to fall into line with the town's committee policy that was established in 2014, as well as adding in a little bit of a section on how to treat individuals who maybe is their character or may have criminal allegations come against them once they've been inducted into the Hall of Fame. Again, it's just a little housekeeping. A lot of other Halls of Fame through our professional organizations that the Hall of Fame is a part of, which is the International Sport Heritage Association and the Canadian Association for Sport Heritage. Lots of our other member organizations are starting to have these conversations and just including these in their policies, with the hopes that no one ever has to use them, but just giving us an avenue to deal with issues in the future if they ever did arise.
Okay. Good. Councillor McCann.
Well, I would just make the comment that I don't know where the last 18 years or so have gone, but it's hard to imagine that the Stocky Center has has stood down there this long and has been busy and successful as it has. It just seems like yesterday, I was there for the inaugural opening, and it seems like just yesterday. So congratulations on this, and good luck in the next 18 years, Caitlin.
Thank you. I will say we're starting to gear up and plan for 20th anniversary celebrations in 2023. So keep your eyes peeled.
Good, good.
Thank you for that.
Any, Councillor Keith?
Yes, thank you. Caitlin, I'm wondering if you can just expand a little bit more. Certainly there's a lot of work has been done here in housekeeping and being sure about policy that we would be voting on tonight. But what I'm wondering about is how many facilities, when you're looking at policy, how many facilities would have been canvassed before the information that is presented here tonight happens?
Through your
Yep.
worship. So when we first started considering how to move forward, I had conversations with, I would say, upwards of 25 other halls of fame located both in Canada as well as around the world. So this is what we're presenting here is sort of a conglomeration of the way that other sport heritage organizations handle this. And I would say this policy falls well in line with what everyone else is doing.
Okay. Anything further? No. Anyone opposed to the passing of this bylaw? No one's opposed. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Dyer. Moved by Councillor Borneman, second by Councillor Bachman, that bylaw number 2021-7182, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council, be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. Are all members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Bachman, second by Councillor Borneman, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Anyone opposed to the passing of the bylaw? No, good. That's carried. So prior to adjourning, I'd like to offer the following information to the public regarding the next council meeting. The next regular meeting of council for the town of Parry Sound is scheduled for Tuesday, November the 2nd, 2021 at 7 p.m. The meeting will be held via Zoom video conferencing and will be live streamed and recorded. All regular council meetings are held at 7 p.m. on the first and third Tuesday of each month, except January and August, where only one regular meeting is scheduled. The council meeting schedule, notices of special council meetings, complete agendas and minutes, and instructions on accessing live streamed and recorded council meetings are all posted on the town's website. Go to www.parrysound.ca under news and public notices. Your TV airs council meetings on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. following a regular council meeting. And for Cogeco listings, contact www.yourtv.tv. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening. Good night.
Good night, everyone.